All right, here we go. We have actor Isaiah Washington. Welcome to VladTV.
Thank you for having me, Vlad.
Hey, longtime fan of your work, man. You've been putting it in for a while now.
Yeah.
With legendary projects, standout performances. Appreciate you coming in today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Absolutely.
It's your first time here, so I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in Houston, Texas originally?
That is correct. Born and raised.
And what was Houston like in the 70s?
That's a good question. Well, for me, in my bubble, my grandmother was a domestic for this Jewish family called the Solomons. So for me, I grew up on collard greens and gefilte fish.
I've never heard that combination together, but okay.
Yeah.
Collard greens and gefilte fish.
Gefilte fish. I knew that's what it was. I didn't know what it was. It just strange. I didn't know what it was between, that and pig feet. It all looked the same in these little mason jars. But I didn't think my existence was any different than anyone else's. We didn't have a lot of money, apparently. Like I said, my grandmother was domestic, but there was a lot of love in the house. I was always pretending to be Michael Jackson from the Jackson 5 or James Brown. I was always the guy that was running around the little shotgun house making everybody laugh. I had a pretty interesting, solid, creative childhood in spite of the apparent segregation. But it's interesting enough, I talked about this with someone else. I said, I never recall my grandmother ever using a racial epithet. My mom, here and there, she would use certain terms like redneck or, the P word or whatever. But never my grandmother, who I know surely rode on the back of the bus. And every Friday, she would go to Paul Bosch's Houston wrestling match. So it's like those days on Fridays, don't talk to her. It's like she's not going to cook. She'd cook early. But Fridays, I never really saw my grandmother before I went to bed. So that was pretty much my life. It was very, country in a way, Right down the block, there was somebody that had a couple of horses in their backyard. We could go through the certain trails in our community and rely on other people who would be barbecuing and whatnot. It was, when I really look at it, it was kind of very P Valley-ish. My recent character with the gold tooth, open face.
Right.
That's why I was like, those are the people I remember. Very colorful as my childhood in Houston, but it wasn't a lot of, and it was always mixed. Poor whites, Latinos. That was my existence. It was always diverse before we had this word, diversity. Yeah.
Well, in 1976, you were 13 years old.
Yeah.
You were watching the news one day.
That is correct. Good, Vlad.
Tell me what happened.
That's good. I've told this story many times, and it still hits me differently every time I tell it. I'm always been interested in the word manifest and manifestation. It's like if you think of something, a mentor of mine back later on in my life, and when I became an actor, started becoming an actor, studying in 1986, 10 years later, he would always say, if you want something, put a picture of it up somewhere, and then it will actually come to you. And he was right. I decided in 1976 at 13, after seeing my father's name on television, there was a famous, colorful newscaster named Marvin Zindler. All white hair, white wig, little blue tinted shades, really shady character, whatever, loud suits. Looked like a pimp actually, but on TV. But he was just the biggest life, right? So everyone loved watching Marvin Zindler. You never knew what he was going to say. And that day, the opening was as Isaiah Washington was killed on Lucky Street in Acres Home. You know how those movies go when everything just blacks out and it's just a circle, a little white circle on whatever that focus is. And, I was totally like, what did he say? Because that's my name. Never heard that name on TV before. That's TV. That's like, what is that? And sure enough, my stepfather came out and pulled me out of what I thought was being in shock. Didn't say a word. We never got along anyway, but that's one day I felt compassion from him. And that his body language confirmed that, yeah, that was my dad who was murdered.
Okay. Up to that point, did you know your dad at all, your real dad?
Nah, didn't have a relationship. He was just the guy that would pick me up or not pick me up or disappoint me, leave me on the steps. I would wait all day, he wouldn't show up. And when I did, all I remember, I would end up in some juke joint or smelling cigarettes and whiskey. But I loved it. I loved that smell, you know. You know,
Okay.
that's the cologne for my biological father, but no, I didn't have a real relationship with him. No.
So here you are, 13 years old, and you're finding out your dad got murdered
Yeah.
in Houston, in the Houston area.
Yeah.
Do you know what actually happened in that particular situation, or?
He was abusive. You know, he my mom would say he probably had it coming. You know, that's why I remember being caught up in an altercation, which my mother always said, "How can you remember that?" It felt like one of those moments out of To Kill a Mockingbird, with just a kid standing between these two titans' legs and being thrown at this rose bush, trying to defend my mother at the age of 5. Apparently, he was, you know, a womanizer and very brutal to women that he met. So whatever, when you live with a woman in Texas or in Houston, there for a certain amount of time, that woman is now what you call a common law wife. So the interesting thing was I was watching, you know, Good Times, John Amos, who I always imagined to be the perfect father for me.
Right.
And we went from watching, I think, Beverly Hillbillies to Good Times, and then the news came on or something, or maybe Good Times was going to come on after the news, 5 o'clock news. But that was like my routine, is to watch Beverly Hillbillies and Good Times, because John Amos was like my dad. That's who I wanted to be my dad. That was everybody's African-American most dream to be a dad. And ironically enough, he ends up becoming my mentor.
Yeah, later on.
Later on in my life. But yeah, I made a pact to myself at that time that if you ever heard the name Isaiah Washington again, it would be in a positive, powerful way. Probably I would be playing in the NFL, running backwards like Deion Sanders. At least that was my goal at the time in Texas high school football. But that never happened.